Hello. Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started here, so if you can take your seat, hopefully get more coffee. I hope everyone's doing well today. Really excited to be kicking off the 2024 Virginia HIMSS Fall Conference. First and foremost, I really want to thank everyone for being here. I know everyone is incredibly busy. I know we have incredibly busy lives. My hope is that it's going to be an incredibly fun, incredibly productive, incredibly action-packed 2 days for all of us, and just really excited to be kicking this off. We have an incredible list of speakers. We have some incredible networking opportunities, and should just serve as a really great place for us to potentially unplug from our day-to-day lives and hopefully make some progress. Because I know, each and every one of us in this room is incredibly passionate about something as it relates to the healthcare space, and I think if we put our minds together, we have the potential to really, make a lot of progress in this room together. So before I get started, before I kick things off, I'm curious, how many people is this their first time at a Virginia HIMSS conference? That's a lot of people. Okay. So either we do a really good job and people have heard about it, or we do a bad job so people only come once and you guys are all newbies, but you never know. So I hope you guys are gonna have an incredible time over the next day and a half, and really hopeful that we'll get to see you back. We're gonna spend a lot of time talking about some of the upcoming events, but for now, I really just wanna kick this off. First and foremost, I really want to start by thanking all of our sponsors. As all of you know, we absolutely could not do this without you. So please, in the many breaks and the many networking opportunities, please take some time to go learn about what each of these sponsors does. At the very minimum, go fill out your bingo card, because they're going to be giving out some incredible prizes over the course of the next couple days. And I think it's a really good opportunity to just learn what's out there in the industry. So what I really thought I would do before turning things over to a much better set of speakers, because you guys are probably all wondering, why is this guy, he's 31 years old, not really sure how he became president, why is he sitting up here talking to us? I will keep this very brief, but I did want all of you to know who I am, and that fly wants to know who I am. I want you all to know who I am so you feel comfortable to come up and tell me your ideas. Tell me how you want to get more involved with the chapter. Tell me how we can do better. So I thought I'd briefly introducing myself. So my name's Thomas West, probably should have started with that. I am the Virginia HIMSS Chapter President. What that means for all of you who are wondering what a Virginia HIMSS Chapter President does, it means that all of these lovely board members tricked me into planning this conference. And it was a trick. I had no idea how to do this. I certainly had no idea that I had to stand up here and talk. So if I seem a little bit nervous, it's because I'm hiding it and I'm super nervous right now. But I joke, it was a team effort. There's an incredible group of board members that put this together. So at some point, I might ask you all to do it now. If you want to stand up, I would love for everybody to know who you are as the board, so that as you see everybody around, please talk with them. Please introduce yourselves. Tell us, yeah, they didn't know I was going to do this, so they're mad now. Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Absolutely could not have done it without them. So a little bit more about me. In my professional life, I work at a company called Lirio. We do personalized patient engagement for healthcare organizations throughout the country. In my personal life, I spend the bulk of my time working, but when I'm not working, I am chasing around a 22-month-old that has way too much energy. My wife likes to tell me that it is just me getting paid back for all of the energy and all of the pain that I put her through for having a lot of ADHD. Outside of that, I try to make a little bit of time for hobbies like scuba diving, like bowling, like paddle boarding. For those of you that saw me yesterday, you know that I do not make time for golf, and I'm awful. I like to say I get the most out of my money because I hit more shots than everybody else does. I wanted to spend a little bit of time just telling you all why HIMSS, what are we doing here, what is HIMSS in particular, what is Virginia HIMSS about. I think there's a lot of things that people can get out of HIMSS. It's a really great organization to network with like-minded individuals. It's a really great organization to learn, to connect, to network. And it's just a really great group of people. And at the very minimum, if all you do out of it is meet some friends, meet some mentors, meet some colleagues, and get together and have a good time, well, I think that's a pretty great organization to be a part of. For me, it was a really great learning opportunity. I joke about having to plan the conference, but 4 years ago, I joined the board. I have the privilege right now of serving as chapter president, which as I look back on my career and certainly early on in that, it's very shocking to me that I'm here. I joined the company that I'm at now that pivoted into healthcare about 5 years ago. At the time, I had no idea what healthcare was. So it's a little bit comical for me to be sitting up here talking to all of you great people that probably know a lot more about healthcare. I recall my first calls when I was sitting down in my basement, of course looking good up top, wearing gym shorts on the bottom. Sad I can't do that at this exact moment. And I would yell up to my wife, who is a dietitian at UVA, of course, nicely yell, not meanly yell at her. And I would ask her, what is the difference between outpatient and inpatient? What does PCP stand for? What do all of the acronyms, which I am still very convinced all of the acronyms that you all have are made up. But I would yell up and ask her, and I would just slowly learn, slowly embarrass myself on all the different phone calls that I have. But through that, I was able to join this organization and start to connect with people that really got this and that really took me under their wing. And so for me, Virginia HIMSS ended up being this really great community that allowed me to learn. It allowed me to grow much faster than I think a lot of 31-year-olds have the opportunity to do. And it just became a really great organization for me to just really grow in my career. It also gave me a love for the healthcare industry. Again, 5-7 years ago, would have never said I would be in healthcare. But what's cool about healthcare is each and every day we can go to work and whatever we do, and we have the potential to make an impact. Not just on the industry as a whole, but on every one of the individuals' lives, whether that is family members, whether that's colleagues, whether that's people that we pass at the grocery store. It's an industry where we're really able to make a really big impact, and that's exciting to me. So that's a little bit about me. I wrote my speech down, but I don't even think I've read it, which is cool. So I share this not to talk about myself, because I'm not just up here to talk about myself, although I can do that all day. So as I see you all throughout the networking opportunities, happy to do so. I more so say it to hopefully to just inspire each and every one of you to lean in these next couple days. It's hard to unplug for conferences. It's hard to be present for these talks. But if you can lean in, take a little bit of time to connect with someone, potentially learn something new, potentially see kind of how you can grow at this conference and with the Virginia HIMSS chapter as a whole, I hope that each and every one of you can go on a similar journey in your own way through this organization. Our theme today is humanizing healthcare IT, where tech meets touch. In some ways that could mean how do we think about cool ideas versus how do we think about actually practically innovating. In other ways it could mean learning about everybody's favorite buzzword, which I'm of course excited for Trip to talk about, which is AI. It could mean that you're wanting to learn more about some of the great organizations that are out there, like the Lorna Breen Foundation, and how we figure out work-life balance, how we make time for fun things versus not just working all the time and getting stressed out. We have some incredible representation from throughout the state. We have UVA, we have VCU, we have Centera, we have places outside of the state like Cone Health, we have Carilion, Mary Washington, an incredible group of leaders. We also have an incredible group of vendors that are here and great just influencers in the space. So I think if we can all spend a little bit of time together, really put our heads together, I'm hopeful that we can take a really great step in the right direction. So with that, I just want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you all for taking time from the craziness of your lives. Just really excited for the opportunity to kick things off. And with that, I get to turn things over, hand the mic over to our first keynote, Dr. Jose Morey. I'm just excited to hear what he has to say to kick things off for us.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Jose Morey. I'm originally from Caguas, Puerto Rico. I'm a radiologist here in the Hampton Roads area. I work with medical center radiologists. We cover most of the Centera facilities and the Bon Secours facilities in the area as well. My previous background, I was Associate Chief Health Officer for IBM Watson Health, and then Thomas here flies back. After that, I've been a consultant for the previous 3 administrations. During the Obama administration, I was the Director of Artificial Intelligence at NASA iTech, which is a startup accelerator for deep space exploration. During the Trump administration, I'll actually talk about this as well. I worked with Cord-19, which was a project with the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. It's a project that we did during COVID-19, using a large language model to develop rapid research during COVID. And then most recently, I've been on a panel with NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, which has been advising the Biden-Harris administration around AI policy, specifically generative AI policy. So we live in a time of magic. We live in a time of dreams. We live in a time in which things that we used to think were impossible are now possible. Things that we used to think were relegated just to science fiction. Things that we thought we would only see in movies or read about in books. Things that we used to be told stories of when we were little. Things that maybe our favorite authors like Asimov, maybe our favorite producers and directors like Steven Spielberg would make in their movies. Things that we used to think we would only be seeing in our dreams. But that's the interesting thing about the time that we live. We don't live in a time of science fiction. We live in a time of science fact. We live in a time in which we're talking about robots, not just walking amongst us, but living amongst us. We're starting to have existential discussions about what is life, what is consciousness, what is aging, what is death. Is death something that we even have to be concerned about? If we age in one direction, can we age in another direction? Is this something that has to happen or not happen at all? We live in a time of not just AI and robots, but a time of anti-aging medications, 3D printing, the times that we're talking about becoming a multi-planetary species. This is the world in which we live in today, and it all starts specifically with artificial intelligence, which I know is probably on the minds of everyone here. AI and data analytics really is the foundation of all these future things that we're talking about. All the things that we start dreaming about. You know, we used to read in holy books about making the blind to see and the lame to walk, and those were just things of scripture. But these are things that we are doing now physically with science. These are no longer things that are just relegated to the realms of religion. What you're watching now is water? No, thank you, I appreciate it. What we're watching now is self-driving data from a car. By a show of hands, how many of you have been in a self-driving vehicle before? That's a lot of you. Impressive. You can put your hand down. First time, be honest though, first time you're in a self-driving vehicle, how scared were you? Yeah, it's really scary, right? It's not something that you're really used to. So the first time I was in a self-driving vehicle was actually for this project. It was a company called Yandex. Yandex, if you combine Tesla and Google and Amazon together, that's essentially Yandex, but it's for Russia. So being in a self-driving car is scary enough. Being in a self-driving car in the streets of Moscow, that's a different level of pucker that I hope you never have to experience in your life. And this was like maybe 10 years ago. But this is the reality of how you know a technology has really arrived. When you start not even noticing that it's a technology. And that's really where we are with artificial intelligence. It is in our self-driving vehicles. It's giving recommendations of who we should date. It's telling you recommendations of things that you should watch on the weekend when you're Netflixing and chilling, right? It's telling you things you should eat. It's finishing your emails to your boss. It's knowing what you're gonna Google before you even start Googling it. That's the level that we are with AI. It's the fact that it's so embedded into everyday life that it's arrived as a technology. And that's what I believe a technology has arrived, when you don't even realize it, that you're actually using and utilizing it so often. And one of the umbrella terms here, it's a pretty educated audience. We know that artificial intelligence is really just an umbrella term for a lot of different things, a lot of different types of algorithms that you can actually utilize. And we know that at its core, AI is nothing but data and mathematics, right? Really complex mathematics, but it's just data and mathematics. And one of the ones that is most popular right now, obviously, is large language models, right? If you hadn't heard of a large language model, I'm sure your teenager has told you about it. How many of you have been using an LLM in some capacity, either in work or in play? Yeah, all of you. How many have been using ChatGPT or Midjourney? Almost all of you. That is the reality. But most of us probably hadn't heard of LLMs until ChatGPT. Well, this audience might be a little bit different, but that's the reality of what most people had experienced. When we talk about the singularity of when an AI is going to become life or conscious, I actually point to earlier forms of GPT. I think this concept of consciousness or life in zeros and ones, I think it's really complex because we hardly even understand what consciousness is in carbon-based life forms, right? We're now starting to really figure out what other beings are conscious beyond just humans. And I think it's a bit of a hubris to think that we are really going to understand when AI may become conscious in the future. We may have already passed that point, we just haven't really realized, and I kind of point to these. Megatron, though, I don't know if many of you have heard of Megatron or used Megatron. Again, it's an educated audience, so perhaps you did. Megatron is what we used when I was at a White House OSTP during the Trump administration. We utilized Megatron specifically for our LLM. So what we were doing was during COVID-19 for the Cord-19 project, we developed an application which is still being used by the New England Journal of Medicine and the British Journal of Medicine. And so what we did was we developed this app that could evaluate research that was being done all over the world in real time, in every language. It would translate it and then develop meta-analyses to then direct researchers and frontline physicians like myself, both for missing data that we had so that you could go out and do research around it, or trends in the data so that you could figure out new drugs to potentially use or new types of therapeutics to use in the front line. So we developed this, and it was honestly one of the greatest things that came out of COVID-19. It was the fact that so many researchers and so many clinicians from all over the world were actually working together to do this. And a documentary was actually created. You can watch the documentary online for free on YouTube or IMDb. It's called Pandemic, but I'll show you a trailer of some of this work.
Time is critical. I mean, this was in early mid-March. The impact of the virus was largely unknown.
The longer time it takes
Time is critical. I mean, this was in early mid-March. The impact of the virus was largely unknown.
Everyone really wanted to feel as if they were empowered to do something.
I'm not a doctor, I'm not in healthcare. It wasn't obvious what I could really do. And then this call to action
Everyone
for
really wanted to
analytics,
feel
for
as
data
if they
science
were
came.
You know, we're creating
something.
AI
I'm not
tools
a
that
doctor, I'm
are
not
able
in
to start
healthcare.
parsing
It
through the
wasn't
large
obvious
amounts of
what
data
I
that
could really
a normal
do.
human could
And
never
then
go
this
through, and
call
find
to
relationships
action
that we didn't even know
for
existed.
analytics,
AI
for data
can empower
science came.
You know, we're creating AI
physicians all
tools
over the
that
world
are able to start
to give
parsing
the same
through the
amount
large
of
amounts of
care
data that
to
a normal
everyone,
human could never
regardless
go
of where
through,
they were
and
born,
find
regardless
relationships
of
that
their
we didn't even know
socioeconomic
existed.
status. AI That's always been the promise of AI. Physicians all over the world to give the same amount of care. Even though that was the promise of AI, regardless one of the great nirvanas right of AI within healthcare is this concept that it can truly democratize medicine. I got into AI in healthcare about 15 years ago. At that point, there weren't many physicians that were actually utilizing AI and working on this. This is how I ended up working at IBM. I was actually at a similar conference, HIMSS National, and I was giving presentations of things that I was doing at the time with data analytics and with rudimentary machine learning, Bayesian models within the healthcare space. And I was actually telling people, don't go and utilize IBM. IBM sucks. IBM is going to charge you a lot. Yes, you'll never get fired for bringing IBM in, right? There's that old adage. But in reality, you can probably do it a very small, skilled team of experts with clinicians, with SMEs, and you can do a much better job and create better applications. IBM was in the audience at that time, and they came to me and they're like, hey, we heard that you think we suck. I was like, yeah, I do. Would you want to come work with us? And I was like, sure, I'll come do that. Because at the time, still, Watson, had just won Jeopardy and all the other things that Watson done. So it was still kind of the quintessential AI application that was out there. So the fact to be able to jump on working with them was still something that was kind of cool. So I started in research. They have research facilities all over the world. So I worked from Haifa to Zurich to Almaden in San Jose, and eventually worked my way up to Associate Chief Health Officer. And what we've learned, though, and we'll see this time and time again, is that healthcare is hard. Right? Healthcare is really, really hard. And that all of us have certain data sets, and all the companies here and all the clinicians here, everyone's utilizing their data set to be able to do small applications, because that's the data that you have. But in reality, if we're going to start really figuring out how do we transition from being a healthy, well person to early stage disease, to mid stage, and then late stage disease, you really need a panomic perspective of healthcare. You really need to figure out how do we make that transition. And this is what I wrote about in Forbes, where I talk about you really need a panomic perspective to reach that democratization stage. The other thing is, and I'll show a slide here in a second, is the fact that a lot of the clinicians when I was working were saying, Jose, oh my God, you are going to eliminate doctors. You're going to completely take care of healthcare professionals. You're developing all these AI applications. That was 14 years ago. If you were trying to get a PCP visit or a subspecialty visit 14 years ago, it would probably take you like a week, maybe 2 weeks. Now try to get a doctor's visit, right? It takes you a month. It takes you 2 months. And yet, we went from having when I started, 0 FDA-approved applications within medicine, and now there's, 500, 600, with several more coming out all the time. So it really comes from this perspective, this P6 mode of medicine. At least this is my proposition of how we actually get to that democratization, where you really have to have all the different aspects of medicine, all the omics, the genomics, the metabiomics, and all the things, along with public medicine or public data, to be able to get to that preventative, personalized, and predictive aspect of medicine. And you're starting to see some of these applications come out there, personalized. I think there's several here in the room, but there's several personalized kind of bots, especially that are helping clinicians. Marlowe is one specifically for vision care that can kind of help clinicians both set up appointments and also give personalized alerts to different providers, as well as to their client base or to their patient base. And you're seeing this because this is a specific point of care medicine and data sets that you have. And so when you see all the Meditechs or the Epics, they're developing applications that are based on their data sets. But this is also why you're seeing the big tech companies, which are the ones that are really trying to revolutionize this space, and they're ones that could truly disrupt or dislocate the space, because they understand that they have data sets that the Epics don't have, that clinicians don't have. They have those social determinants of health data, and they also understand the power of data and the power of AI, and they know that they can partner with clinicians. If they can go out and get that point of care data with the data that they uniquely have, they can create those panomic data sets to really start figuring out how we transition from healthy well to early stage and late stage disease. But the reality is that we're going to have to develop new ways to actually identify different types of data sets that we've never had before. Respiratory rate, heart rate, these are fantastic things to have. But these are things that we've been calculating and following since the advent of medicine. We really need to start thinking outside the box of new types of data that we're going to get from people 24/7, 365. And how do we do that? Well, you can develop new types of applications, new wearable technology, things like that, which people are developing to find those new data sets. The other thing is you can use AI chatbots that actually talk with the patients, and people are starting to do this, things like Flow and others, right, that actually talk with the patient every day and say, hey, check your respiratory rate, check your blood pressure, and then send us your blood pressure. And it's just simply through text. And then that gets aggregated. So you actually start incorporating concepts with AI chatbots to the clinician or to the patient to grab their data. And like I mentioned, when I first started, people were really concerned that we're going to eliminate physicians. But as we can see, FDA-approved products have now been increasing year over year, and they just keep increasing more and more. And even if people aren't applying or getting the FDA-approved process, which that's usually a big question that people have, is how do we go through that process? But there are companies out there that are submitting, different types of patents that are specifically based on their data sets. Alcon, obviously, it's a eye care company, so they're focused with their patents specifically on things like precision contact lenses or precision glasses and things like that, because they're anticipating that they're going to go through the FDA or the CE process. But some of the greatest advancement within healthcare is actually this. This is AlphaFold. AlphaFold is Google. So Google developed an AI application that actually has done the prediction of how every protein known to man can fold. And from a drug discovery perspective, this is completely revolutionary. This has been causing some of the greatest advancements from AI drug discovery. Because you think about one of the most expensive things and one of the most complicated things in medicine is drug discovery. This is something that can take years, decades to do. It can take millions upon millions of dollars, sometimes billions of dollars, to go from bench to bedside, right? To be able to take something that's theoretical and then get it into the clinical space takes a really, really long time, and it's very, very expensive. But If you start using artificial intelligence, if you can start anticipating how a protein will fold, if you can start anticipating how a drug may interact with a particular cell type, then you can take something that used to be millions upon millions upon millions of dollars, that used to take years upon years upon years to do, and now you've taken it down to a matter of seconds or minutes, and you've reduced the cost from those multi-millions to just maybe under $1 million, maybe a couple $1,000, to be able to identify whether a drug was actually going to work or whether a drug was not going to work. But as I mentioned before, so a lot of companies are working with developing AI applications for drug discovery. Your Pfizers, your Johnson & Johnsons, your Jansens, your Mercks, but it's the companies that you haven't been thinking about. Those are in the rear view mirror and the side mirrors, right? Those are the ones that can Kodak you at the end of the day, where it can completely dislocate you. So from your industry. So this kind of study, where this was one of the largest studies that's ever done with protein sequences, over 250 million. Which company do you think did this? Just throw out a couple of ideas. Which big drug company do you think did this study? Merck? Pfizer? GenMed, one more. Amazon. That was the closest one. So this was Facebook. This was Facebook, or Meta right now, sorry, right? But that's the reality. It's the tech companies that are getting into the space. Why? Again, because they understand the power of data. They're way better at AI than anybody else, and they understand that they have unique data sets that no one else has. And if they can leverage those data sets, then they can get into a space and they can, we talk about having multiple hospital systems here, they can actually be the ones that actually eliminate those hospital systems if they can play their data cards correctly. But this is the power that AI has actually done. I mean, think about the concept of just the human genome. How many of you remember when we solved the human genome, the first time we cracked a whole human genome? That took like a decade to do, and it was nation states. And the cost of that was astronomical, right? It took years to do and so much money. It took the power of the United States and other countries coming together. Now, for like $50, you can get a plastic thing that you spit in at home and then send it in and you get the same data. That's miraculous. And that's the power that we have with data and the power that we have with artificial intelligence. The exponential growth in technology, that's the things that it can do. Now, one of the big boogeymen in the room is diagnostics, right? Going back to having my clinician friends say, Jose, you're going to eliminate our jobs. And yet, now we see that that's not true, right? Is diagnostics, AI for diagnostics. And you're seeing this in every field, and I'll show you a couple slides on this, is the fact that artificial intelligence, time and time again, does just as well as any clinicians. Radiologists, if you go back, if you had looked at some of the FDA-approved products that were coming through, the vast majority of them are radiology. We have been leading artificial intelligence within the clinical space since its onset. Because, I mean, we're pretty much the nerds of the medical field, especially when it comes to data. And it's one of the reasons some of the first clinicians at IBM and at other big tech companies have been radiologists, because we've been involved within data since its onset. So we see this time and time again. AI can do just as well as any clinician, pretty much in any field diagnostically, if you can get down everything into just small data sets. However, the point here is not that AI is going to replace us, because it's not. Yes, existentially, years down the road, AI will replace clinicians. But AI is going to replace everyone in this room in some capacity. But that's not going to be a reality that we're actually going to see. And if our kids see that reality, that completely changes so many things. It's not just one field, right? The very fact that we have to be considering, what do you do with experts like myself that have spent 15 years studying and now are obsolete? That's a very different societal question that we'll be asking. But the take-home point from this, and that I give to everyone, is that AI won't replace you, but the doctor or whatever industry that you're in, you're a statistician, you're a computer scientist, you're an engineer, the expert in your field that uses AI will replace the expert that does not use AI. Why? Because at the end of the day, AI is a tool. Just like a hammer is a tool, just like a saw or screwdrivers are tools, they are all utilized for different jobs. They're not all utilized for the same job, and you have to be smart enough to know when to use one job and when to use one tool and when to not use a tool. And that's the take-home point with that last column, is the fact that when you combine the human plus the machine, that's when you truly have the greatest exponential benefit of AI. Imagine if we could completely eliminate errors. We know errors are a huge problem both from a cost and from a morbidity mortality perspective. So if we could eliminate errors altogether by utilizing AI in diagnostics, that would be revolutionary both for healthcare costs and for our patient population. And we see this time and time again with all types of clinical applications. You see it in dermatology, you see it in radiology, and again, this study was done by Google. The last one, if you notice, was done by the great healthcare company, NVIDIA. And not to be outdone, within the eye care space as well, you have plenty of applications that are FDA approved that can do diagnostics within eye care specifically. Most of the things that they have it for is retinopathy, whether it's retinopathy prematurity, diabetic retinopathy, things like macular degeneration, anything that's imaging based. As we've seen before, anything that can be automated and can be segmented, annotated, and then provide a diagnosis is one of the most beneficial things when it comes to AI. The issue starts getting into the fact when these systems start making diagnostics that you can't even verify by a clinician, that they're seeing things that we can't even figure out what they're actually seeing, but they're starting to predict disease 5, 10 years down the line, and we're seeing that this is true, but there's no way to kind of validate it. And one of the things that, as from a regulatory perspective, which was one of the things that I've been doing with the Biden-Harris administration now in their generative AI policy, is trying to figure out how do we actually regulate these kinds of things, especially when you have subject matter experts that can't actually understand why it's making these predictions. And if the predictions are true, what do you do with that? And how do you protect patients from that, right? Especially if the data might be biased. If the data's been biased because of some sort of systemic inequality that's aggregated that data. How do you protect both the clinicians, the expert, from disagreeing with something, and then how do you actually protect the end user or the patient? We've seen AI make huge leaps forward when it comes to public data or public health. We saw it be able to predict spikes in flu before they occurred, being able to see spikes in COVID, bird flu, and other things before major organizations such as the CDC and others were able to identify these things. We've seen, again, big companies try to get into this space. Who remembers this kind of triad that came together? Do you remember the name of it? I think somebody said it, Haven, yeah. So this came and went just as quickly as it was developed. Why? Because healthcare is hard. But the big players here, JP Morgan, Berkshire Hathaway, they were really the small guys. The big player here was Amazon. Amazon was always trying to get into healthcare, and Amazon is still getting into healthcare, and they've been driving this forward. They drove this concept and this collaboration. And the organization within Amazon that was developing all their healthcare AI is known as 1492. Now, 1492 supposedly is no longer like working together as a unit, but the same people are still there. They're just working in different aspects, and they're still working on healthcare applications, both some of the old applications and some of the new applications that they've been developing as well. Now, who remembers when Amazon bought Whole Foods? A few of you, all of you. So Whole Foods, when they bought Whole Foods, everyone was talking about, oh, this makes perfect sense. This is an e-commerce play. This was never an e-commerce play. This was always a healthcare play. And they were able to develop really unique applications with this. You could go in. Did anyone go to these little kiosks, little Amazon kiosks? No, there were a few, maybe one or two of you. So these were mostly in the Pacific Northwest, so or in major cities, kind of thing. So you would go in, you would scan your QR code, just like you would when you go to Whole Foods now. You would walk in, and there'd be essentially almost nobody there. There'd be a couple people kind of stocking different things, but for the most part, you wouldn't really see anybody. You'd just be able to grab whatever you were going to buy, and then you just walk out, and then immediately within like 10 seconds or so, you would get an automatic ding on your phone of how much you owed Amazon, or they ran your credit card. And you didn't actually check out. So they had cameras all over the place. They had cameras, RF sensors, and all these things, and they would be able to identify what you picked up and then what you put back, and so you didn't actually have to go to a kiosk to check out. Now, the unique thing with some of the healthcare things that they were doing, because they have your purchasing data, right? They have your purchasing history, your social determinants of health. They could analyze your BMI, obviously just with the cameras. They could analyze the mood just with facial recognition, and they could anticipate between 80 and 90% accuracy what you were going to buy when you came in, the order in which you may pick up the items, and in the order in which you may put those items back. And they're still pushing forward within healthcare, right? Amazon's already starting to put out Alexa applications. These are things that they do within the company, and now they're starting to try to commercialize these outside of the company. And it's these types of applications and these types of companies that have the greatest probability to be able to completely displace and dislocate healthcare, because they have a completely different concept of what they're trying to do, and they also have different data sets, and they also understand this data much better than your traditional healthcare entities do. Other types of AI applications that are really transforming the healthcare industry are things like this company called Lumia. Lumia is one of the companies that came through our accelerator at NASA at iTech. It's still going on. It's a Peter Thiel startup, and so they're incorporating data analytics into fabrics. So imagine smart textiles or smart clothing or smart purses, in which we're all here. I mean, I'm a little hot. I don't know about you guys right now. It feels a little warm here, right? But let's say we all had different temperatures. What if your clothes could adjust your temperature automatically, so you wouldn't have to worry about what the temperature was in the room? Or if it could detect whether your insulin was too high or whether your sugar was too low, and what if it could automatically also administer drugs for you? Those are the types of applications that are being developed, and Lumia is still going on strong. There's other companies that are doing similar things. There's some smart bras that have come out that can actually check your heart rate and your blood pressure while you're doing sports or just walking around. There's a lot of interesting applications. Applications like this as well. We talked about at the beginning, making the lame to walk. So there are applications now with brain-computer interfaces that are utilizing artificial intelligence. So people that are paraplegics, tetraplegic, quadriplegics that have been paralyzed for different reasons can actually learn to walk again. So you incorporate the brain-computer interface, and then you have the person train with virtual reality and be able to learn how to use their limbs again that they haven't used before. And then you attach the exoskeleton to them, and then they can walk and be freely movable again. And these are applications that, again, they're not science fiction. These are science fact. These are things that people are utilizing and doing today. And we talk about having to incorporate brain-computer interfaces, but in the future we may not even have to, and not in the near future, or not in the far future, but in the near future. This is me just a couple of years ago at Singularity University using a brain interface to be able to move these robots just with different brain waves that I was utilizing. And they had a whole book to help you kind of like focus on different types of brain waves. My son, who's 18, anyone have an 18-year-old or teenager at home? I'm sorry. So he always makes fun of me because he thinks he does everything better than I do. So for surgical robotics, AI for surgical robotics, AI is transforming the surgical space completely. This was a paper that I wrote with a couple of my NASA colleagues about the future of surgical robotics, because in deep space, you can't take everything with you, right? We're limited by what we can actually launch up, which is why it was such a big deal if you saw just a couple days ago where SpaceX was able to capture the rocket as opposed to just land it, because if you can capture the rocket, then that actually saves a bunch of weight that you can send more things up into space. So we've been developing, and we wrote about the different types of autonomous surgical units that you would need for deep space exploration. But again, these are things that aren't in the far future. These are things that we're already doing now, and there's already surgical units that can do certain things autonomously or semi-autonomously in different aspects. This was actually the STAR robot, which was another application that came through the iTech program that can already do small bowel anastomosis completely autonomously or semi-autonomously. It can also do appendectomies and cholecystectomies from start to finish. And these are the types of things that are coming forward. Again, within the eye care space, specifically, you already have smart robotics to try to help the clinician with LASIK surgery, identifying the different types of cuts they should be doing with the laser specifically for that person's eye, so for the precision medicine space specifically. In the large robotic space, again, AI is making huge strides. I think the place that's the most advanced has been in Asia. In Asia during COVID-19, they had a bunch of applications like AI robots that could deliver food to your home, which you see some here. The robot you're seeing here is actually a robot that was used to actually make food so that you wouldn't have to have the frontline workers actually make food for each other. Robots that could go room to room to actually clean in real time. And then you had robots that could actually analyze whether you had a fever, so you can kind of screen people for fever during COVID. It could analyze whether they were utilizing their face mask appropriately. And since a lot of these were in China, they could actually give you a citation that would go automatically to your phone if you weren't actually using your mask appropriately. So those are different ways to utilize robotics. But Asia is not the only country or the only area of the world that is way more advanced with us when it comes to AI robotics. A bunch of other places are too. In the UK, they're utilizing robots or testing robots for elder care. Elder care is a huge thing. Obviously, we know all over the world, here in the US as well. So trying to utilize AI assistants or AI robots for elder care. You guys have probably seen some pretty advanced humanoid robots. There was obviously the Tesla ones that came out just recently, which, whether you like those or not, it's still kind of a move forward. But Boston Dynamics has been in the human robotic space for such a long time, and they're way more advanced than the Tesla robots, as you see here. And obviously, there's so many applications for humanoid robotics, both in the healthcare space and obviously in other spaces as well. Utilizing AI to make precision contact lenses, as we talked about before. And what companies have been learning is that when they start applying AI into their company as a whole, whether in the human resource space, whether at the factory space, it's allowing them to then upskill and reskill their employees. And that's one of the biggest things I think that take-home points as well. Once you start applying AI to different aspects, you can actually then start focusing on things that are more important. And that's something that I've been working on as well with different companies. We've been starting to develop VR educational spaces to actually train employees and train staff on AI, and also upskill and reskill them in different applications. And I'll show you some of the VR applications that we've developed for upskilling and reskilling. Nanorobotics is another space in which AI has allowed us to kind of move forward, being able to develop small nanorobotics to be able to do drug deliveries, at least theoretically. And all that we're doing there is really mimicking our cells. If you look at us at a cellular level, we're just small robots. And so we're just doing biomimicry to see how our cells work, and then we're creating small robots that kind of move and act in the same way. But from drug delivery to diagnostics and therapeutics, these are all the things that people are actually working on in laboratories right now. From an imaging perspective, AI is making huge strides as well, especially in the telemedicine space. What you're looking here is a term called holoportation. The first successful holoportation was actually done by NASA on the ISS. Now you have a lot of companies that are doing this on a regular basis. What you're looking here is at Microsoft HoloLens. And there's different types of applications, but they're not the only ones that are working on these types of things. This one in particular needs twins of rooms to be able to work so that both people can actually interact in real time. But you think about what you can do this from a telemedicine perspective or televisit perspective, whether synchronously or asynchronously. Obviously, synchronously is super helpful, but be able to do real-life visits and checks. And now people are starting to work with haptic technology, haptic suits, whether gloves or full suits, to actually be able to feel each other through the holoportation. This is kind of again, not the future. These are things that are happening right now. And obviously, there's so many other applications that you can consider that this would be helpful or useful for, right? Other things that holoportation can be used for, or these types of augmented reality applications, is precision teaching as well as precision surgery. Be able to apply this in real time when a surgeon's actually doing a procedure. I do some interventional procedures, so imagine if I was looking at the vasculature in real time and be able to access the individual's CT scan or MRI on top of what I'm doing in real time. These are things that are moving the needle forward. And then this last one is kind of a mix of mixed reality or an augmented reality together, or extended reality. So these types of applications, you're mixing the real world with the digital world. So right now what you're watching is someone who's wearing an augmented reality glasses like HoloLens or other, and you're seeing a little character that's interacting with the world in real time. So this character was able to grab that desk and throw it down. They're interacting with the elevator in real time, and then they disappear into the real world, and you can have the real world come back into reality once you get close to it. But it's not just digital life with real life. You yourself can actually interact with this and take the real world and turn it into the digital world and start interacting with it. So from a healthcare perspective, you can think of things like this for PTSD and for other applications. Children's hospitals are using this a lot, as well, this kind of augmented reality or extended reality, where they'll have the kids never actually see the surgical unit or even see aspects of the hospital, where they're constantly in this kind of fantastical world. They may be in a hospital facility, but they're not actually seeing a hospital facility. And these are the types of things that are being utilized, and obviously you can have everything come back into the reality. And this is kind of this is how some of those conversations start interacting of, is what you're seeing here real, or do you live in a digital space already and you just don't even realize it? How do the Sims know that they're not Sims, right, from that perspective? I don't know if you guys heard that AI podcast recently of the two AIs being told that they weren't human. So AI podcasting, has anybody played with that? A few of you. So it's really hot. It's APIs that you can do really easily, and people are utilizing it now. But there's an AI podcast out there, which the two podcasters are really popular, and they're told finally that they're AI, and they start having this existential conversation. We were just told we were AIs. And even one of the podcasters is like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? I tried to call my wife and talk to her about it, but she's not real. So it's really interesting, and that's where these conversations come up of, are we living in a reality, or are we living in a simulation kind of perspective? Because it's starting to become very complicated to tell different. Thank you very much. Think I have time for questions? Yeah? Okay. Any questions, please? Yeah. That's a great question. It's kind of there's two sides to that. It's everyone within AI, not just healthcare, is kind of, every country is kind of taking, it's a wild, wild west. Everyone's taking their own perspective. From just in the generative AI space, people are really concerned with ChatGPT, Midjourney, with protecting patents and IP here in the US and in the EU. The EU is by far the most progressive when it comes to AI safety regulation. I would say, but if you look at places like the EU or even the US is trying to catch up to EU, we're very much protective of individuals, specifically around like companies, where when it comes to IP and patents, as opposed to if you go a place like Japan. In Japan now, if you create a generative AI company, you can use anyone's patent technology, and you can use it and create an AI based off any IP, as long as the company's based in Japan. So they're trying to capture the greatest generative AI talent by saying, hey, if you come to Japan and create a generative AI company here, you can take anyone's IP and do what you want with it. So there's different countries are doing things in different ways. What I would say, you guys specifically, there are nonprofit organizations or even HIMSS itself can create entities to really push your Congress people and your senators to really move the needle forward, to say, hey, you need to be thinking about this, both from a patient safety perspective, but also from a company perspective, and help kind of the things move forward. One of the things that we mimicked at NIST was we developed the US AI Safety Institute. And we did that based on really copying the UK's AI Safety Institute, which they developed several years ago. The Europeans are also starting to develop a grading system to be able to give different AI applications a grade, so that if an AI application is used by you, whether it's used in your healthcare, whether it's used in any kind of application that you might be utilizing it, you can see the type of AI that was developed by that grading system. And what they mean is, the importance of the industry that it's being utilized in, and whether there's a human that's validating that AI or not. So very similar to how they put warning labels on like cigarettes or warning labels on other things that are carcinogenic, they're planning on putting warning labels on AI. And I think that's a very progressive and kind of smart technique. Yeah.
You talk about, with AI, allowing projects to go multi-million-dollar work, a number of years, be done within seconds, much smaller budget. What, if anything, is any administration looking at regarding the labor impact that has? Because that also is multi-million-dollar investment in people's salaries
Yeah.
and their time.
Yeah.
That is now being
Yeah. It's a huge problem, and I think it's something that we've seen time and time again. Automation is great for the consumer, and it's also great for the company if the company then, in a purely capitalistic system, says, oh, well, if I can eliminate all of my labor, then I can make all of my profit. And that's great in theory for those companies, but yeah, from the reality of everyone in the room, if all our jobs are eliminated because the companies that we work for no longer need us, that's a societal problem. That is a huge societal problem. So to answer your question directly, there's not enough people thinking about this. There's a small number. Again, the Europeans are way ahead of us with this kinds of thought process. I was in China for 3 months this summer, and they have a completely different perspective, because they, with an aging society and with a dwindling population, they need more workers. So even if they develop these AI applications, they're not actually supplanting workers. And a lot of companies are actually, in China, are utilizing as much AI automation as they can. It's been beneficial for them because they need more work, but they're not actually displacing workers. Here in the US, that's a different thing. Like, we're gonna be displacing workers, and in other countries, you're gonna be displacing workers, and that is a real societal discussion. Similar to how, a lot of things are moving to more greener technologies, you're displacing the traditional people that were supplying those old types of technologies. If you don't help take care of those people, that's a problem, and we're not having enough serious discussions about that. The current administration is trying to incrementally do that, so I'll give them props in that this administration is probably the one that's taking it the most seriously, but it's still not enough. And the reason that it's not enough is because you don't have enough smart people in the room that really understand and are having these discussions. So unfortunately, one of the things that I think the greatest thing that AI could replace is most likely politicians, regardless if you're on the right or the left side of the spectrum. And there are people that are putting that forward of having governments that are run by AI and not actually by politicians. But the reality is that the political class that we have typically aren't IT experts. They're not AI experts. They're not tech experts. And yet they are the ones that are putting these regulations forward. Yes, they have SMEs like us that they sometimes bring in, but the reality is they don't have an innate understanding, and it's really complex. And then to understand that AI can be biased, and especially in the healthcare space or in the criminal space, if you start putting AI applications that are based on biased data, that's a problem. So there's a lot of complex problems that we're not having enough discussions, but that's why it takes experts and organizations like this to really start thinking about, all right, this is maybe something that we haven't thought about. Let's start thinking about how do we kind of push the regulatory process? How do we kind of leverage and be a voice from the IT perspective? Because this is something that needs to happen actually from experts like you to actually be moving folks in Congress, in the Senate, and executive branch forward.
Considering how Amazon was able to do that data collection in their shop, what discussions are happening at the national level about data collection with informed consent for the individual? Because we're moving into public collection of data.
Yeah, not a lot, and it's a problem. But you've seen this already an issue with social media, right? People have always thought social media is free, right? Facebook is free, Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it is free, but it's not free. You're paying for it with your data, and that's actually how valuable your data is. So there's not enough discussion about that, because right now if you're in the public space, technically anything can be acquired. So there needs to be having a different discussion. That's the thing with evolving. That's the thing with progress. As things move forward, we need to start thinking about new ways and new laws and new regulations. You don't want to stifle innovation. Innovation does help, but at the same time, you don't want to completely annihilate an industry. Like if you make fully autonomous vehicles, what are you going to do with every truck driver or every delivery driver that we have? I mean, that's a serious middle class impact right there. Same thing from a private security perspective. How do you protect people's individual rights to be forgotten, individual rights to not use your data? And how can you trust, how do you verify that data has then been scrubbed, not being caught up in the algorithm? So we need to there's not enough serious discussions about it, and it's a serious implication that you're bringing up. But this is also why people are starting to have discussions around universal basic income. Because if companies are utilizing our data, that is something we're giving to the company. That is labor in a way that we're providing. So thinking about data as labor. And then if we think about data as labor, then you actually have a way to compensate people. Like, hey, you can take part in this public information disclosure. You can take part in social media disclosure. But then these companies that are making billions of dollars by taking your data and then reselling it to you through applications, then that's maybe a way that it's fair, because then society is taking part in creating great applications that we're all utilizing, but then we're also getting compensated for it. So that's where those discussions people are truly having, because at the end of the day, if all of us in the room don't have a job, how do we send our kids to school? How do we eat? Yeah, great question. So what the gentleman was asking, that he said that we went through this kind of 20 years ago with cyber and trying to keep up with it. It's almost nearly impossible to keep up with it. That's the problem. But you make a really good point, and that's what some people are trying to utilize, is use AI to help regulate AI, to try to anticipate what types of protections should be out there. The thing is that when you're training a model, you have to have previous history to kind of figure out what to start doing predictions. So there's a certain amount of, you have to let it progress, and then you can start developing those things. But I think when you start using AI to help regulate AI, that's really where we're going to have to go. And that's why people are having the discussions of, all right, well, how many AI systems could we, or what types of AI systems could we put into the political space or into the government space to help automate these things? Because see, the reality is that we as humans just can't keep up with it. You know, we can't. We can make things better. You know, us with the machines can make things better, but we need to let the machines do what they do best, and then we do what we do best.
I feel like you can't go anywhere without seeing AI. You're obviously very close to it in a lot of different ways. What are you most excited about, and what are you most afraid of?
Most excited about and most afraid of? Most excited about is this perspective of a utopian society. I tend to be an optimist at the end of the day. I feel like the opposite is just depressing. So I try to be optimistic of how AI can truly democratize a lot of things. I mean, if we truly get to a utopian state in which we don't need to work because our basic things are taken care of, and that you could just work for pleasure. And you see some of these things in some aspects. You see this in Europe. You see in places that are more socialized, that have a lot more social structure and a lot of social supports, where you see people in their 40s, 50s that are, you know, they're working to live, or they're helped taken care of. If AI can do that in places that we tend to work ourselves to the bone, like in the US, we're very hard workers. There's pros and cons to the hard work ethic that we have here. One of the cons is that sometimes we work ourselves down and people die because of that, right? They don't have time to go see their doctor. They don't have time to spend with their family. What if we gave that time back? You know, what if we got to the point where AI took care of most of the things that we were doing, and we had time to explore the arts, we had time to explore the world, we had time to just explore ourselves and our family. That's kind of one of the exciting things, and the democratization of things. The fact that if we get to a point where we're democratizing healthcare, it doesn't matter if you are in inner city Chicago, or if you're in Afghanistan, or if you're in Boston, Massachusetts. You know that you're going to get the same level of care regardless of where you are. That's kind of an exciting potential. A dystopian kind of worry is everything that you guys have kind of brought up. You know, the fact that what if we completely dislocate people? What do we do with privacy if we want to be forgotten? Those things are scary. And out of all the technology we've ever created, technology is amoral. It's neither good nor bad. Humans are not that way, though. And we've seen, like, with things like nuclear technology, right? Nuclear technology is a perfect example. Nuclear technology is fantastic. We've done amazing things with it. We do use it in medicine all the time. But we've done some horrific things with nuclear technology to each other. And AI is the closest thing to a progeny of a technology that really imitates and emulates humanity. And humanity is kind of the same way in general. We have an amazing capacity for love and compassion and to do things that are above ourselves for a greater good. And we see this all over the place. But we also have an amazing depth of depravity that we can get to. And we've seen some horrific things that we've done to each other as a society. And hopefully AI ends up being better than us, or taking our better angels. And if it is, I think we'll be okay. If it's not, that's a different story. Yeah, I think that's the concept I talked about, the P6 or the panomic. we really need to have a better understanding of how we transition from healthy well to early stage disease. And we don't, because healthcare is so complex. Because right now, a widget can be made based on Meditech or Epic data that can give you a probability of a diagnosis, right? But you can do that with Google right now. You can just put in a couple of symptoms, and it can give you, hey, you know, my chest hurts. Well, you might have cancer, or you might have something else, right? And that's usually what drives patients crazy. You're like, oh my God. So the reality is that in the US, it's farther away than it is in other places. One of the projects I worked on during COVID, I got hired by a company called CP Group, which is it's the largest multinational in Thailand. And it was a government funded project with the largest company. So CP Group, they're a conglomerate. They do everything from grocery stores to telecom, to tourism and a bunch of other things, healthcare. And so in Thailand, we don't have the same regulations of dividing healthcare data from public data. So we were able to create an AI application that could give individual risk scores to a person of their probability of developing COVID. And since people could opt in or opt out of being tracked, we could track people and see how they were moving around the country. So we were not able to just give a risk score down to an individual. We could also give a risk score for each province. And so this would allow Thailand, the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Tourism, not have to close down the entire country. They could close things down province by province based on a statistical probability of COVID having a spike in that province. And that also helped the country be able to move PPEs and FTEs from a place that most likely was going to have a downturn in COVID to a place that was going to have an uptick in COVID. But this concept of being able to integrate this data in the US is far away from being able to happen. And there's a lot, obviously we know a lot of complexities as to why we have that. In other countries, I think that probability is much closer because you have to integrate all these data sets to be able to make the complex diagnosis that you're talking about.
When you're talking about democratizing, you know, the patient outcomes based off of AI, and we're talking about integrating these data sets, are we also talking about this cross-company? Because I see this being another social media kind of race. You know, you have your Facebook versus MySpace. Well, no one has MySpace anymore. So what if Amazon gets ahead in the AI medical space and then pushes out all these other companies? Are they going to have a monopoly on that patient data, or are we talking larger scale, you know, maybe national depository, I guess, of patient data in that aspect?
Yeah, like a national single payer kind of concept. One of two things. I'm a big proponent for a national single payer system because we see that it tends to drive down healthcare costs in every other country that it's done it. We have a very complex, you know, layered system, and ours ends up being the most expensive. So it doesn't make sense from a taxpayer dollar perspective to be the one that's most expensive and also has some of the worst outcomes. It just doesn't make sense. But with that being said, if we continue on in the pathway that we have from a political perspective, then we still need people in government to actually hold companies accountable, which is the problem that we don't have. For example, the ACA, the whole concept of the ACA, one of them was to prepare for a world like this where you have more in-depth data and can actually take that data and develop these applications. So the ACA was forward-thinking and ahead of its time. So you actually can have great kind of things from a political perspective. Not everything has to be, you know, poorly thought out. The ACA was a concept of what we're living in now because they were forward-thinking and thinking about where are we going from a data perspective. The ACA also had some teeth into it that people aren't actually applying. One of the things the ACA did was to say that companies like Epic and Meditech and others, they had to, by law, actually share their data and make it interoperable. I think all of us here know that that is not a reality. And that reality of them just not following the law and people at the top not holding companies accountable, that's a problem. I mean, we have anti-monopoly laws, but we see monopolies developing all over time. Yes, I think they're talking about breaking up Google potentially and maybe Amazon in some respects. But if we don't, then if we have these laws in place and we don't actually follow through with those laws, then what's the point of having the law in the books? You know, I can understand if you let someone by with a warning for going 5 miles over the speed limit, but you have companies that are completely abusing the system to the detriment of every single person in this room. So, yeah, we have laws already in place, but we have to make sure that people are actually holding the companies accountable. Or you can go to a single payer kind of system. One of the two. Time for one more? Sir.
You mentioned upskilling and reskilling, basically the concept of experts or SMEs with AI knowledge or AI capabilities replacing current day SMEs. Can you speak a little bit more on that?
How that happens? Yeah, great question. So I think one thing that every company does really poorly is, and it's understandable because things are moving so quickly, is not having appropriate AI education for their staff. And that's something that I have been working a lot in trying to do with companies. We all have, if you're in a large company, you have some sort of continuous education internally, especially in cybersecurity. There's some cyber folks that were talking. I think you have some cyber folks over here. There's regulations, right, for especially if you're in the financial sector and other sectors of how much cybersecurity education you need to be giving to staff, like for anti-phishing and stuff like that. We don't have those regulations yet for AI education, but I'm a proponent that we should, or companies should want to do this automatically themselves. You should be wanting to train your staff to be the most educated on AI as they can, because it's only going to make your staff more efficient and be able to do more and provide better labor for that company, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a large conglomerate. So having internal AI education, I think, is one of the most useful things. It doesn't need to be a fancy, VR kind of educational space, just basic videos on education. But you don't have that. You don't have that right now. So that's something that I do help companies with and help provide developing those types of applications. And you're going to see, because ultimately it's a tool. It's just like you're not going to teach your staff to use Windows, or you're not going to teach your staff to use PowerPoint, or you're not going to use your staff to use the latest and greatest whatever technology it is in your field. To not use AI is nonsensical to me. It's one of the most powerful tools we have right now, if not the most powerful tool, and it may be ultimately the most powerful tool we will ever have to do so many things. And every job in here, I mean, you saw by a show of hands, everyone's already using it. Why not actually, from a company perspective, actually start applying an educational process so that you can have best practices within your company to actually promote the best utilization of AI and to get the most efficiency out of that. So that, and then from a basic educational perspective, I think we need to start teaching AI to kids earlier and earlier. And that's something that teachers have been kind of angst and animus against. And again, it comes from a lack of knowledge and understanding that they fear AI is going to replace them. And they really don't understand that it's just a tool. It has limits, and it has uses for, but it has limits for. And they need to be teaching kids at a younger age how to use that AI. They need to change the perspective in schools of how they're teaching. Because just like coding should be a second or a third language, AI needs to be a tool that we start teaching our kids from an early aspect. Thank you very much, everybody.
What an awesome way to kick off this conference. I would say one more round of applause for Dr. Morey. That was awesome. Really incredible. I think one of my biggest takeaways is it gave me some incredible talking points for my annual I get bored at the holidays and convince my mother-in-law I think we're in the Matrix. So this is going to be a really fun holiday season for me. But thank you so much for that. It's a great way to kick things off. A couple of housekeeping items before we transition into a little bit of a networking half hour. So one, we know it's hot, the doors are open, it's gonna cool off. I thought it was just me being nervous initially, but I think it's already starting to cool off, and the doors being open will help, but we're working on that. Second, I mentioned in my kickoff fun, I'm guessing everybody saw it on the agenda, but we are gonna be hosting a kind of networking happy hour, just fun get together tonight. I believe it starts at 5:30. It should go till at least 9, potentially later, depending on how much fun everybody is having. It'll be at Elements, which is right past where you checked in. So everybody's invited. There will be food, not just hors d'oeuvres, free drinks, potentially lots of drinks, a book signing. And then we are also gonna do something a little bit different this year, and we are gonna have live entertainment. So we have a trio band coming in that will likely start around 5:45 with some light music, jazz. I also know the guy really well, and he knows how to have a lot of fun. So depending on the crowd, it could turn up and be pretty fun for that. Last thing, we're transitioning into a kind of just 30-minute networking break. So please go check out the sponsors. Again, they're the reason that we're able to do this. They're the reason we're able to have some incredible speakers like Dr. Morey. So go talk with them, and we'll be back here right at 10:45 for our next talk with the Lorna Breen Foundation. Thank you.